Hey, how's it going? Welcome to another Count of Monte Cristo reading by Alexander Dumas. So, today is chapter 8, Villefort and Mercedes. So, this is a fairly quick chapter. Again, for recap on some of the stuff that's been happening in the chapters recently, uh, you have this man, um, which is Edmond Dantes, who is a prospective sailor who is destined to become a captain of the boat that he was sailing on, um, but is falsely imprisoned. At this point in the last chapter, they are sending him to the Chateau d'If, which is the prison that is off the coast of where they are currently living, which is supposed to be kind of like a high max security prison. Uh, so at this point, he has just arrived and felt a kind of coma followed with resistance. Yeah, and he descended 15 steps. So he literally is just thrown into the cell without any question so far. Uh and I think they were talking about. Yes. So he does go about asking the prisoner, or he goes about asking the guards to speak with one of the like bosses or the people in charge, uh, and they decide to throw him into uh, the dungeons. So rather than being in the prisons, now he's in a lower level, where they state he descended 15 steps. The door of a dungeon was opened, and he entered, mumbling, "He is right. They must put madmen with madmen." And that was the end of last chapter. So, chapter 8, Villefort and Mercedes. We are going to be talking about the aftermath of what has happened. As we have seen, Villefort hastened back to the Rue de Grand Cours, and on entering the house of Madame de Saint Méran, found the guest he had left at table seated in a salon at their coffee. Rene was the rest of the company with anxiously awaiting him, and he was received with a universal fire of exclamations. "Allo, Decapator, Grand of the Stay Brutus," said one, "tell us your news." "We are threatened with a new reign of terror," asked another. "Has the Corsican ogre broken loose?" cried a third. "Marquis," Villefort said, advancing towards his future mother-in-law, "I've come to ask you kindly to excuse my abrupt departure. Monsieur le Marquis, would you honor me with a few moments' private conversation?" "Is it really so serious as all that?" the Marquis said. Noticing the dark cloud that had gathered on Villefort's brow, "It is so serious that I must take leave of you for a few days." "You are going away?" Renee cried, unable to conceal the emotion she felt at this very unexpected news. "Alas, mademoiselle, I am obliged to do so." "Where are you going?" the Marquise asked. "That is a state secret, madame. But if you have any commissions for Paris, a friend of mine is going there tonight." Everyone looked at him. "You wish to speak to me?" asked the Marquise. "Yes, let us go into your study." The Marquise took Villefort's arm and they left the room together. "Well, and what has happened?" "An affair which I consider to be of a very grave nature, and which necessitates my immediate departure for Paris. Will you give me a letter to the king?" "To the king? But I dare not take upon myself to write, his majesty." "I do not ask you to write the letter. I want you to ask Monsieur de Salvieux to do so. He must give me a letter which will enable me to gain his majesty's presence without all the formalities attendant on the request for an audience, which would only lose precious time. If it is so urgent, my dear Villefort, go and pack your things, and I will make their Salvia write the letter. Do not lose any time. I must start in a quarter of an hour. So saying, Villefort ran out, but at the door he bethought himself at the sight of the deputy of the Procureur de Rue. Through the streets would be enough to disturb the general peace of the town, so he resumed his ordinary magisterial pace. At his door he perceived in the shadow a white spectre waiting for him, erect and motionless. It was Mercedes. Having no news on Edmund, she had come in person to inquire the reason of her lover's arrest. As Villefort drew near, she moved from the wall against which she had been leaning and barred his way. Dantes had spoken to the deputy of his betrothed, and he now recognized her at once. He was astonished at her beauty and dignity, and when she asked him what had become of him whom she loved, he felt as though he were the culprit and she his judge. The man you speak of, he said abruptly, is a criminal, and I can do nothing for him. A great sob escaped Mercedes' lips, and when Villefort tried to pass by, she again stopped him. But tell me, at least, where he is, she said, so that I may learn whether he is alive or dead. I know not, was the answer. He has passed out of my hands. Embarrassed by the straight look she gave him, as also by her entreaties, he pushed by her and entered his house, locking the door after him as though to shut out all sadness. But sadness is not banished so easily. Like the wounded hero of Virgil, he carried the arrow in his wound. He had no sooner entered his room than his legs gave way under him. He heaved a deep sigh, which was more like a sob, and sank into his chair. For a moment the man was in doubt. He had often passed the sentence of death, but the condemned men who owed their execution to his crushing eloquence had not caused him the slightest compunction, for they had been guilty, or at all events Villefort had believed them to be so. But if at this moment the fair Mercedes had entered and had said to him, in the name of Almighty God, who watches over us and is our judge, give me back my lover, he would have given way, and in spite of the risk to himself, his icy cold hand would have signed the order for Dante's release. But no voice broke the stillness. The door opened only to admit Villefort's valet, who came to tell him that his carriage was at the door. Poor Mercedes had returned to the Catalans, followed by Ferdinand. Grief stricken and desperate, she threw herself on her bed. Ferdinand, kneeling by her side, took her hand, which she did not attempt to withdraw, and covered it with kisses, but she was oblivious to it all. So passed the night. The lamp went out when the oil was consumed. Mercedes was no more aware of the darkness than she had been of the light. Day broke, but she heeded it not. Grief had made her blind to all but Edmund. M. Morrel did not give up hope. He had learned of Dante's imprisonment and had gone to all his friends and all the influential men of the town, but it was already reported that Dantes had been arrested as a Bonapartist, and since even the most sanguine looked upon any attempt of Napoleon to remount the throne as impossible, he met with nothing but coldness, fear, or refusals, and returned home in despair. Cataros was restless and uneasy, but instead of trying to do something to help Dantes, he had shut himself up in his house with 2 bottles of wine. Donglers alone felt no pang of remorse or restlessness. He was even happy, for had he not avenged himself on an enemy and not assured for himself the position on board the Pharaon, he was in danger of losing. He was one of those calculating men who are born with a pen behind their ears and an ink pot in place of a heart. He went to bed at the usual hour and slept peacefully. And that concludes chapter 8. Uh, wow. Okay, so this is kind of touching up a lot of side characters a lot. This isn't focusing on Edmund or Dante's at all. This is just kind of like it's almost like a montage a little bit. It's such a quick chapter, but it's almost like it's cutting from one character to another, showing what is occurring to them in these moments of like Dante being arrested and how it's affecting everybody's lives in turn. You're seeing people move in, trying to take advantage of situations as well, where like you now have people like what's his name? Ferdinand. So Ferdinand also trying to take advantage of the situation is now trying to cozy up to Mercedes, who is in grief, and even you're feeling the tension of also the guy that sent him to prison, Villefort. So Villefort is now like grief stricken himself. He's feeling so guilty about sending her lover to prison without a reason, uh, even though he has much reason because of his family's background and stuff like that. So he's trying to basically save his reputation, save his family's reputation. But it's so interesting to see how he's dealing with like the grief of encountering Mercedes in that moment. I feel it's such a strong moment too. Even though this chapter is very small, it's only a couple pages long. It has a lot of emotional, kind of like tug of war between characters. Interesting to think about. If you're watching from the YouTube, our next chapter is going to be chapter 9, The Little Cabinet of the Tuileries. So I hope you guys enjoy that reading. I'll see you all for the next one. If you guys are watching from YouTube, make sure you hit that subscribe and like. Uh, there's gonna be a couple boxes that will be popping up at the bottom of the screens for the Grimm's fairy tales and tales of horror. Go check those out. There's a lot of really good readings in there, a lot of cool stories that I think you guys might like. And I'll catch you all on the next one. Bye.